What's up, Archons? I'm Flightless Pheasant, and today I'm going to be doing my KFC recap video. I know, I'm like a month late, but I'm still out before Ghost Galaxy, probably. So, it's fine, right? So, today I'm going to be going over my experience at KFC, all of the things that happened, all of the events, my decks. This is a personal experience recap, so I'm not going to be going over, who won and all that stuff. You'll have to wait for Ghost Galaxy to release their official recap to see all of that, but we're going to be talking about my day-by-day experience, and I'm going to be sharing with you some of the cool things that happened while I was there in a more detailed way than my daily recaps can normally cover. So let's jump right into it, shall we? So before we begin in earnest, let's talk about our host, the ever-famous Game Center. Game Center is a fantastic space that was hosted last year and has hosted all of the major KFC events. So big shout out to Game Center. Thank you so much for hosting. So when I showed up on Thursday, the participation looked pretty similar to last year. I think we had 160 people. And everybody was getting ready for the first big event of the weekend, which is, of course, the Last Chance Qualifier. So let's take a look at what I had for that. Okay, so let's take a look at the decks that I opened for the LCQ. I'm not going to bury the lead. I didn't open anything particularly fantastic, and I ended up 0-2ing and dropping out into the loser's bracket on round 3. But let's take a look at what I did have. So I had Overboss Niemund Ewing. So I didn't pull any of the pods from this deck, but I always like showing you guys everything I had access to. So it had a decent Dis pod, but there was a better one in one of my other decks that I ended up using. Redemption is trash. I barely looked at it. Star Alliance isn't much better. There was really nothing here that spoke to me, so I ended up walking away from this deck very, very quickly. However, Debelmis the Swiftly Winged had a much better Dis pod. With a lot of destruction ability, with a coup de grace for good destruction. It had Delta P for good destruction. Now, it did also have an Annihilation Ritual, which I was a little worried about, because that is a bit scary to be running around with, but I figured, the rest of it's actually pretty solid, so we'll give it a try and see if we can make it work, and I think it worked out just fine. This Logos pod didn't really speak to me. Stentor's formula is, of course, very good, but the rest of the pod didn't really have much to say in terms of being incredible, and the last deck I opened definitely had the best stuff in it. And then the Redemption pod, again, terrible. I barely look at Redemption pods because they're just not good. So that leaves us with Crackpot Morehouse the Confident. So I considered running this deck straight up. But ultimately, I decided in round 1 to run just the Saurian and Untamed pods. So this Saurian pod, I actually really liked. It had Gracken Reform, which I think is a really great card. It had 2 Degenerate Decors, which are also very good. It had, just several things that I thought were going to work out. It had a Salvatorum, which I was particularly excited to get my hands on and get to play around with a little bit. And in round 1, I went with this Untamed pod because it looked pretty fast, with a low Dawn and a Bufo with an Amber Pip and a couple of Persistence Huntings, a Lambent Mycelium with an Ambermancy, which I thought I could pull off, and I did. 2 Vivid Fairies and a Rat Pixie. It just looked like it was going to make a lot of Amber very quickly. Unfortunately, a lot of Amber very quickly doesn't matter in Prophetic Visions Sealed. You're going to get your butt kicked every time if that's your plan. And sure enough, I got my butt kicked every time. Well, the one time. And then I swapped the Untamed pod for this Sanctum pod because I didn't really have a lot of Amber control in the previous build. So this Sanctum pod was really the only pod I had with any significant Amber control because I didn't pull any shadows and my Logos didn't have it. So I decided I would run this because it had double outflank and it had Book of Malefaction to punish a little bit of steel, but not really in any meaningful way. And it just seemed like it would do a little better, but I came up against a deck that was running Cosmic Recompense and Trink's Creed, and I just could not keep up. Because Prophetic Visions is really about getting Dis, Shadows, Logos, or getting one of a handful of busted cards, busted rares in Star Alliance or Sanctum, and if you don't get those, you kind of don't win, and that was my experience. So I got bounced out into Second Amber, where I did okay, and I played several rounds of Second Amber, but the real thing that was exciting about Thursday is what came next. So after the LCQ wrapped up, they started the keynote presentation for the Keyforge Celebration of 2025. If you haven't been to a Keyforge Celebration, the keynote presentation is where they talk about all the successes from the previous year. Christian Peterson comes out on stage and he says, hey, here's all the things that happened last year. Here's all the things that are going to happen next year. It's a very exciting little presentation, and they go over a bunch of different things. This year, they did a whole bunch of stuff recapping the last year. I'm mostly going to skip over that because it's the new stuff we always want to focus on, right? So they talked about draconian measures coming out in the early part of next year and how it's introducing the new house, House Uboros. For those of you who haven't been keeping track, it's a dragon-centric theme with a dragon-centric house. They talked about the release schedule for 2026. Good news, the release schedule next year is very thinned down. They've gotten rid of most of the side sets, and they're just focusing on their core set releases. So it's going to be Draconian Measures, a summer story event, which I'm glad they're still doing because those are really cool and a lot of fun. And the set in fall of next year will be Shattered Reality, which is a follow-up to the events of Draconian Measures and the Certain Darkness event. So the other thing they announced is that they are going to be doing another new player discovery kit, which I think is really great. The new player discovery kit was a really fun idea. It sold out completely last year, so they're going to do another one next year, or this year, next year. It's going to have redesigned metal keys. It's going to have in-store marketing materials. It's going to have activity guidance, prizes for winners. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. I had a lot of success last year with my Discovery kit and managed to get some new players into the game, so I'm glad that I'm going to get a chance to do that again. They gave us a more long-term look at the organized play schedule. So the Discovery kit's going to come out sometime in January, February, so we're going to get announcements on that really soon. Store Champs in February, March. Vault Tours are April through September. Story events sometime in August or September, or maybe October if they're slow to get it out. Nationals in September to October, and then, of course, KFC for next year in November of 2026. So it's good to have a little bit of a look at the schedule. They talked a little bit about deck clones and how there's new accolades, which we all know is coming out. But if you're not aware, deck clones are a really cool thing. They also recently announced that you'll be able to get deck clones for Prophetic Visions, which is super cool. They talked about their playmat tool, which is another really cool thing that if you haven't looked at it, you definitely should. They worked with their printing company, Forgefire, in order to be able to make custom playmats, a bunch of artwork options, crazy things to look at. It's at the Keyforging website. If there's an artwork that they officially have that you don't see on there, let them know. They are really good about updating it. Okay, so this leads us into the part everyone's really wanting to talk about, and that is the results of the Certain Darkness event itself. So the Certain Darkness event was a really big deal, and it was where basically House Logos tried to dig into interdimensionality, and in doing so, they released something called the Darkness. And the Darkness tried to consume all of the Crucible, and we got to play an event where we did our best to not get consumed by it. And at the end of that event, the house that got consumed the most was Sanctum. And so they told us that both House Logos and House Sanctum are now gone and will not be returning. Now, I have a theory relevant to that you can look at in one of my other videos, but just know that I think we will be seeing some version of both of these houses coming back in some form, but neither house will ever be the same. That is, we'll never have a House Logos or a House Sanctum again. And then immediately after this, they did the Meet the Ghosts, which is where they get all of the major creators up on stage, and you get to ask them a whole bunch of questions. The Warcast Reforged has a recording of the Meet the Ghosts that they put up on their platform. You could definitely check that out. It's super good as a back and forth. I did ask them personally about their plans for IP expansion beyond the card game. So are they going to put out a new art book or new short stories or new role-playing setting? They said they had no plans to do that, but if you are interested in that, or if you know a company that's interested in that, to reach out to them, because it's never out of the cards to do something like that. So that's very exciting. But yeah, that was the big thing for Thursday, was just getting through the keynote presentation and, of course, the LCQ. So Friday starts off with the Sealed Open. I had a little bit better luck with that one, so we'll take a look at my decks for the Sealed Open and see what we think. So I had a little bit better luck with the Sealed Open. So this deck, the Fabulous Changeling of Trash Ruin, I actually pulled nothing from. It has a pretty good Logos pod, but I had a better one to pick from. The Redemption is fine for Redemption, but I was sure I could do better. And the Untamed is nothing special, but I like showing you guys all the decks. You know, This is Holmes the Confidant of Haimban. So this I did pull 2 pods from. I pulled the Dis pod, and it's a pretty mediocre Dis pod. You know, a couple of Scorpions aren't too bad. There's a Dark Minion, there's a Carrion Worm, there's Oh You Shouldn't Have. And the Shadows pod I pulled was okay. It has a cover fire, which is definitely good. But that's about all it has in terms of things that are actually, like, really good in Shadows for this set. There's another Untamed pod I also skipped over. But the real star from my sealed experience was Desauce of Spirit Dean Paradise. So the Saurian and Untamed are nothing really special, but this Logos had 3, count them, 3 rage resets, which was just oppressive. Combine that with a Parallel Thinking, a Stentor's Formula, a Candle Unit, and I was being really, really mean. I didn't end up using the Prophecies from this deck, but I did use the ones from Holmes, which had an Ask Again Later, as well as an Outlook Not So Good. So I did have some ability to go off before my opponent could actually start their turn and hit them with a Rage Reset before their turn actually started. So I ended up dropping out of this tournament. I was 1-2 going into round 4, and it was lunchtime, and I wanted to spend some time with my family, because for those of you who don't know, my nephew and my mom were both at the event, and so I had a lot of other things on my plate, and honestly, it was an okay deck, but for Prophetic Visions, I didn't really feel like it was going to carry me all that far, so I decided to go ahead and drop. But I'm really impressed with this triple Rage Reset Logos pod. That was quite a thing to play, and it was really, really hard to deal with. And even though my Dis and Shadows pods were kind of mid, they did manage to perform pretty well. So the other thing that happened on Friday was we got a peek at the Draconian Measures set, which was ready enough that we actually did get decks to take home. So they had a couple of cards that they were previewing in the case before that, but the actual set itself we got to play on Friday night, and I opened a deck. So the deck that I opened was Mars Aquidon Geistoid. I'm going to go through the whole deck here so that you guys can kind of see what I was playing with. But it was a really fun set. I was actually very happy with the way Draconian Measures played against itself. I managed to go 2-1. So I managed to win my first 2 games, but I lost my third one. It was a very, very interesting set. A lot of board state based mechanics, a lot of board state interaction. It was very interesting. I did play a few more games with it later against other sets, and I gotta be honest, it doesn't really stack up against the more recent sets that have come out. It just kind of can't really perform on the same level that Prophetic Visions can, but it did have some neat tricks, and I was very, very happy with it overall, and I'm looking forward to doing more with Draconian Measures when it comes out. Look forward to my box opening video when the actual set finally launches. So that takes us into Saturday, where I was playing an Archon deck, and I was playing Prophetic Visions, thank you very much. But yeah, let's take a look at the Archon deck I was playing and see what you guys think. So this was my Archon deck this time around, the Ogre that measurably reviews Mail. So this is a Prophetic Visions deck that's basically just Prophetic Visions good stuff. It's not really like incredibly highly tuned, and it doesn't really use the prophecies all that much, but it is just basically Prophetic Visions good stuff. If I have to point to specific things, it's using 3 Wild Wormholes, which is really good. It also has Captain Chaw, who's been enhanced into House Shadows, and 2 Bandit Culvers, which was really nice, especially because those are the only house pips I'm really working with. There are a couple extra Shadows pips, and they landed on a Pied Viper, who I don't normally care about, so pitching him to steal one, pretty good. 2 Hawks, a Hoodwink, a Miasma, and a Cover Fire. All of which are really great Amber control and give me lots of options. Honestly, I like this deck a lot. But it didn't really hold up in Archon. I played a couple of games with it, and I ended up losing out before round 4 started. It was good, but not fantastic. And honestly, the Archon field right now is pretty scary. Yeah, you know, I won my first game kind of by luck, and then I just really couldn't win from there. So, yeah, it was unfortunate that they couldn't really perform, but I like this deck a lot, and it's the highest SAS deck that I have right now. It even beats out my Alpha Gamma, which Alpha Gamma has a lot more counterplay, so I thought maybe this would be better because there's fewer counterplays, but just couldn't really get it to perform the way I would have wanted to. So that brings us to the final day, Sunday, where normally there wouldn't be that much to talk about, but this time around, we actually did do a Triumvirate tournament, which was a team tournament. Yes, you heard that right. The last tournament of the event was a new format called Triumvirate, which was a team tournament. I paired up with two of my Team Visible Hand teammates, Lazarus and Odinsona, to run this event. The way they did this was really interesting. So each player got two decks from... Each player in the team got two decks from different sets. And it was all sets from last year. So it was Vaultmaster 25, and the Grim Reminders and Amber Skies. So I decided to play the Vaultmaster decks because I actually like Vaultmaster 25 quite a bit. I was pretty pleased with that set. So this is what I ended up running, and the way it worked is you had to win 2 out of 3 games, and you played against like sets. So I knew I was going to be playing against a lot of the same thing that I was running. So what I decided to do is I decided to run this deck because it had triple Ronnies, which is a pretty good amount of steel, with a hit and run and a miasma, so I could bounce and get some value out of that. Nerve Blast for steel. A subtle chain with a chain gang could work, but with just one, it's not super likely. But I figured I'd try it anyway, so good Shadow Steel. But the bigger thing I was doing is my Brobnar and Dis were just board wiping constantly. I had 2 copies of 3 Fates. I had unlocked Gateway. I had no name to purge. Like, I was basically just double Recklessness to clear hands, 2 Power of Fires to cause Amber loss, Final Refrain to bring everything back and just do it all again. Like, the plan was just keep the board clear. And it worked 2 out of 3 times, and the one time it didn't work is because my opponent had a lot of bursty, spontaneous Amber generation in Brobnar, which if you don't know Vaultmaster 25, that's like one of the really scary things that you can do in that set. And I just really couldn't do much about it. But I liked it. It played really well. It has super high disruption and creature control. And everything else is pretty mid, but it also had pretty good Amber control. So I figured, hey, you know, messing up my opponent's plan is probably the way to win in a rip it and grip it, you only choose out of 2 sealed. I feel like in that environment, I probably could do pretty good. And I think we did. But yeah, that was the final event of KFC. And so that was the last thing we got to do, but I think it was really cool, and I hope that they do something like this again in the future. So that was my KFC experience this year. I did pretty poorly. I didn't really make it very far in basically any of the tournaments. I did pretty well in the special events, so like Measure for Measure and the Triumvirate, I did pretty well. It was a ton of fun, though. There was so much going on. I didn't even cover any of the, like, community-driven events that were happening besides that, like the community decks and the special events. Like, there was just so much side content going on. I couldn't even cover it all. But I wanted to make sure I went over all the main tournaments and showed you guys all my decks and got you to look at all that, because I know people like looking into the numbers and the metrics and all that. I had so much fun, you guys. It was great. I got to bring my mom. I got to bring my nephew. My sister was there to help out my nephew. Like, I had so much fun. Team Visible Hand was there in good numbers. Like, it was a great time. We had like 160 participants. KFC's always a blast, but this year was like really great. And I'm so looking forward to next year, and I'm so looking forward to Draconian Measures release. Look out for that when it comes out. I'm going to be absolutely doing a unboxing of my content. Hopefully, all of the spoilers for Draconian Measures will make their way onto the internet so that I can do a lore picks before the set actually launches, but we'll see. I still need to do a lore picks for Crucible Clash. I haven't forgotten. It's in my brain, and hopefully it'll come out soon, but holidays are madness, so I'm going to do my best to get some more content out to you guys. I know I've been a little bit slow lately, but it's the holidays. It happens. But as far as this video goes, that's all I have for you today. So until next time, later, Archons.